what they have recognized is that they have no use for us. And I wish that was an exaggeration, but you can see this so clearly in what they did to the public over COVID. They were unconcerned about delivering novel, they're not vaccines, but novel so-called vaccines into people who stood no chance for benefiting from them. Healthy young people, there was never an argument that made any sense for delivering those shots to healthy young people. About the best you could say was that you might do that in order to protect vulnerable, infirm people. That's not something a rational civilization would do, but at least that's a logical argument. But at the point that we discovered that these things did not in any way control the disease, they didn't control people contracting it, they didn't control people transmitting it, the logic for inflicting them on healthy young people who were not threatened by COVID and stood to gain nothing evaporated. And yet we're doing it to this day. Harvard apparently just reinitiated their policy of requiring those shots for their own students. So what that's telling you is that whatever is driving doesn't care that it is going to kill people who have long, potentially important long lives with potentially important contributions to make. People imagine that the spike protein is the cause of the pathologies. And while I think the spike protein was a very poor choice for these shots, that it does create pathologies of its own, I don't think it's the majority of what's going on. And in fact, what I believe is it is likely that many of the deaths that occur as a result of these shots, it's the result of the mRNA platform itself. That anything you loaded onto that platform would produce many of these pathologies because the platform itself is deeply flawed. And that matters a great deal because one of the things, and I don't know what level in the explanation it serves, but one of the things that is true is that the COVID pandemic, whatever its nature was, from complete psyop to entirely biological, allowed the normalization of the mRNA platform being brought and used on the public with minimal testing, which made the flaws in the platform disappear. The fact that we were in a hurry to get out of COVID allowed them to normalize the mRNA platform, and that platform, from the business perspective, allows you to reformulate virtually any vaccine that you wanted. And
in lifetime.
Right. Presumably to repatent it, to create vaccines very quickly for new pathogens, whatever their origin might be. And what we in the public need to be aware of is that they haven't figured out how to solve the problem with it. So anytime they deploy it, we need to say no. So let me just describe a little bit about why that flaw exists. The mRNA message, this is a genetic message loaded into this platform, is surrounded by something called lipid nanoparticle. If those lipid nanoparticles stayed in your deltoid muscle, then their consequence would be localized. And although this consequence would be negative in your deltoid, it wouldn't be devastating to your health. But they, of course, don't stay in your deltoid, which we learned very early. They circulate around the body. And the problem is that lipid nanoparticle, lipid just means fat. And because like dissolves like, the fat on these tiny particles causes the mRNA to be absorbed into any cell they encounter. All of your cells are covered in a fat layer. So wherever these things circulate around the body, they get absorbed. And when they get absorbed, they trigger the cells that have taken them up to produce this protein. Now, this is the important part. Your immune system is built so that it recognizes any cell of yours that is producing a protein that you do not ordinarily make, and it targets that cell and destroys it.
Like it's cancer.
Like it's virally infected. Yeah. So basically, their mRNA shots are a pseudovirus. They infect cells, cause those cells to make this protein, and then the immune system treats them like they are virally infected cells and destroys them. Which, if that happens in your liver, maybe it's not that serious. You can afford it. If it happens in your heart, it's potentially devastating because it creates a wound, which is then a vulnerability. If you're a soccer player and you're running particularly hard, you can get a blood vessel that bursts in your heart, causing a devastating pathology, causing your death, for example. Right? This is a predictable consequence of a shot that has no ability to target which cells take it up, and therefore no ability to protect you from your own immune system, destroying the cells that have taken it up and giving you a lethal wound. Diabolical, yes. Geniuses, I don't think so. I think these people are reckless, and they do not understand that they are having a much easier time breaking these systems than they will have rebuilding them. They are gambling with a planet that isn't theirs to destroy, that is actually, it is the birthright of every living person, and it is the entitlement of all the people who will eventually live here. They are gambling with it, and they obviously don't know what they're doing. Even the elites, what I call the rent-seeking elites, who we are clearly fighting, even they are depending on us winning, because they don't know how enough to run the system. They don't have the proper caution in their model. They don't understand the systems that they're playing with. We're up against something that I call Goliath. And Goliath is partly built of a cabal or several cabals, and it's partly an emergent phenomenon. It is ferociously powerful, but it's also stupid. It is relatively easy to beat if it is not on territory where it is dominant. And so this means a couple things. One, it means those of us who are fighting that force should always keep in mind that getting Goliath on our territory, not its territory, is the way to beat it. You can beat it easily if it's off its footing. And
that's why we marched into a trap on January 6th. We went into Goliath's territory.
Right, exactly. And it was scripted. So the fact that Carlson, like you, like Joe Rogan, has established an outpost that is not supposed to exist, right? An unsanctioned kind of media, that's not Goliath's territory. And in fact, Goliath made the terrible error during COVID of imagining that off-brand media didn't matter, when in fact it mattered ever more as people detected that what they were getting on the mainstream channels was not true and in fact was capable of harming them. They started listening to other people who were making sense and piecing it together. Parallel institutions are rising to displace the feeble, broken, corrupted institutions that refuse to function.